This is Pam Electric Ghost, and we are live on our Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch channels with Rose and Forte for the first time, who's a best-selling author. And I would like to thank you for coming on the show. How are you tonight?
I'm doing awesome. Best-selling author and alcohol-free coach.
Yes. And we do have to mention one of our sponsor. You can see at the top. You can listen on Newsly. We are a featured podcast. The Pam Electric Ghost podcast is a featured podcast on Newsly. If you use coupon code GHOST, you can get 1 month free premium subscription so you can stop scrolling and start listening. You can set up alerts for your favorite podcast and news articles. So check out Newsly. Use coupon code GHOST to get 1 month free premium subscription. So starting off, you're an international best-selling author, and you've been, I guess you got into that. You were C-suite executive and ministry leader in the church, and then that kind of
Yeah.
seg into the whole situation with your alcohol issues that you found a way to get out of that. And so maybe we can start at the beginning of what's different about the approach that you're taking to kind of free yourself from alcohol dependence.
Yeah, I was a successful executive and mother and all those things, and I used alcohol to, do all the things that society tells you to do, have fun, fit in, check out, de-stress. And I started having issues with it. And I mean, approaches the different thing. I didn't know of anything to help me solve the problem other than AA, which, I understand is a very successful program, but I didn't resonate with it. I didn't want to call myself a name. I didn't want to think about, oh my gosh, once I do this, I'm labeled and I have to quit forever. And it was all so incomprehensible to me. So I ended up going into a secular program that just challenged me. Hey, you want to put it aside for 3 months? And I'm like, yeah, I don't think I've kind of ever done that. it'd be a good shot to see what that feels like. And I had no intention of quitting for that long. And once I experienced it, I was like, this is a good life.
Was that
And
very difficult? Was that very difficult? Because I know people who are addicted to many different things, when they try to
yeah,
turkey, it can be very challenging. Did you? I guess you must have been ready at the point you decided to do that to stick with it,
yeah.
right?
That is a super loaded question. So let me see if I can take that in pieces. It is a substance. And so it can be fairly difficult as your body transitions, out of the substance. The substance is responsible for a variety of lies. I need it. I can't have fun without it. I won't fit in. Everybody will hate me. Life is it's just so that part is super difficult coming to terms with, that. Usually when people are all in, um, on the coaching aspect, this is I guess addresses another difference between, I'm just going to use AA, but there's other 12-step programs out there. When you go into AA, a lot of times something happens. A car accident, it's judge ordered, a DUI, a relationship falling apart, and you're kind of forced to do that. But here, it's more a choice. I may have lost
Mhm.
track. I'm sorry. What was the
No, it
original
seems like I guess it's like I guess cold turkey is the kind of old term because I'm a child of the
Oh,
'70s,
well, and
and the
there's also,
idea of kind of
yeah,
like physically and medically is that very
right.
difficult to
Well,
do that.
there's a lot of levels of problems. And I stop at the level of needing medical intervention, right? I'm not in that business. But there's a lot of people with a lot of serious problems before medical intervention. So this program would be after medical intervention, they'll detox your body. And then it is about being accountable and developing a new approach and dealing with stress. And so that part can be difficult too, but it's mindset, right? You can be excited. And that's the other difference about this coaching program. Excited for something different and empowered to choose that because it's better versus victim to a disease, and I mean, there are neurological pathways. Any person that has a habit, all of us have habits. So let's just start there, right? All of us have habits. We'd like to change them and we find it difficult. And this is what we're doing. We're changing the habit of grabbing for something when we're stressed, of grabbing for it to fit in, so it's just about changing the neurological habit. But I love that because, recent science will tell you that there's neuroplasticity. And before, I'm trying to think, about 100 years ago, was it less than 100, like 80? I think in the 60s, they started coming up with understanding neuroplasticity and that you can rewire your brain. But before that, I think that is why they classified it as a disease. They thought that once you get this, you're done. You're toast.
Get out of it.
Yeah. And so I kind of like this approach because one, it's, hey, let's challenge and see if you can do it for 12 weeks. Let's see if we can change a neural pathway and, just develop this awareness of what happens when I choose a drink. The science behind what alcohol does for the body is just coming out. It's like the cigarette industry years ago. They used to advertise it as sexy, the Virginia Slim woman and the Marlboro Man, super cool.
It's all the culture.
Yeah.
I mean, it was all kind of combined with alcohol. Like if you looked at the whole kind of bar scene, it was the combination of the cigarettes and the alcohol would give you this kind of vibe that puts you in the mood to be in that kind of party scenario or the social scenario, the how you can kind of relax. You're going to relax with your cigarette and glass of whiskey or some kind of cocktail. And another question I had is like, okay, if you decide to change your mindset, you decide to work on your pathways, but the social group that you were in, where you were, trying to fit in, does that become like an issue when you start to change? If the people around you don't change, what do you do about that?
Yeah, and that is really one of the biggest fears that people have about quitting. Like, what's going to happen with my friends? How do I socialize, right? So there's definitely a couple of things we do to address that, and one is to change the narrative and change how you talk about your choice to be alcohol free. If you want to go out with your friend, first of all, at the beginning, if somebody doesn't feel strong enough to engage in these practices, we just tell them to wait long enough to where they feel strong, where they can try these. So, we just had a client do this, and they had a situation where they're with lots of friends and it's a drinking event and they've always been the one to drink. And what do I do? And, the first thing you got to handle is, why aren't you drinking? Or here, have a beer. And the response matters so much. And it's like, I got to quit. It's like, it's just like you can play it as a downer, or you can play it as like, hey, I'm just taking a challenge and putting it to the side, seeing how I feel. Like, it was really affecting me, like, negatively. When you say that to drinkers, people don't really question whether or not that's true, right? But being happy and acting like you're excited about putting it to the side to just kind of detox or whatever, that's all they need to know. What I have found is poor, like the gender difference. Like if a woman says that, it's just like, oh, okay, cool. I wish I could do that. If a man says that, come on, like, come on,
Yeah,
buck
there's probably a
up,
lot of
buck
peer
up.
pressure. Yeah, it's probably a lot of peer pressure. I remember being in fraternities, and I think that, at least in my experience, when I went to college, the whole frat culture was very much into the kind of like really abusive drinking behaviors that
Hmm.
are not positive. And I think a
Right,
lot of people from those college days, they continue that kind of binge drinking because that was what was cool in the frat, and then they never get out of it. And
right,
and it's kind of like, okay, well, that's what these all the boys are doing in this club, and then that goes to the course, and it goes to this, and it goes to that, and people never get out of it. And there's a lot of peer pressure with the guys that, oh yeah, you're kind of wimpy if you get out of it, 'cause you
hmm.
can't hold yourself, and you have to go against that, as a musician, and when
Oh,
musicians
as a
decided to
musician, I
stop.
can't. Yeah, that's got to be
Yeah,
hard.
we had to stop, decide like that all the substances actually don't help the music. They actually hurt what you're trying to do. And when you started getting older and musicians, we start saying like, we're not doing that anymore. And there's still guys who are doing it. And you're like, well, we can't really work with you if you're still in that on that path, because we're not on that path anymore. And so,
Right.
yeah, it's a kind of, you have to make decisions. At least in my business, that's what happened.
Yeah, no, and it really messes, I know a lot of creative people that initially used it for creativity, and then they find that it really takes away from their creativity. It takes away from your productivity. I'm sure it takes away from your sound. And yeah, but back to that bar and the friendship thing, I think once people kind of get used to that narrative and start hanging out with people, the really cool thing that many experience is the difference in people. Like there'll be people that just are too ashamed to drink in front of you. Like they just don't like it, right? But that's
Hmm.
not the majority of people. Most people either don't care if you drink or you don't drink. And then the really cool thing is you empower others who prefer not to drink to order something different.
Not
And that
drink.
that is super cool. When somebody says, "Well, I'm like, I'm going to have a soda water and cranberry and lime, please." And they're like, "Oh yeah, that sounds good. Me too." You get, because there's a lot of people that could care less about a drink and they order it just to fit in. And so you give
Yeah,
those
it's
people
that peer pressure.
permission. Yeah, and it's just a really cool realization that occurs over this time frame of, wow, I thought people cared about my drinking. They could care less that I have a drink. And there's this occasional friend that happens that's very sad, but it's the drinking buddy. And they care so much they don't want to be around you. But then you ask the question, were they really a friend? You
Yeah,
know?
because it's like a codependency if you're both doing something that's bad for you.
Yeah, and if
And, you can
they're
find this in many places, like people, yeah, if you could
yeah,
gamble, you could do other substances. Like if that person was the person that gambled with you, that's the person that did this with you, and then suddenly you stop because it's like, I can't do it anymore. Right? It's not good for me. And then they can't handle it because they can't handle the change in you. Like, but everybody's kind of responsible, I believe, for their own destiny to a certain extent, like what they're going to choose to do. And,
yeah,
it's up to you. And if you decide like that's not good for me anymore, and that person can't respect it, I mean, it might not work.
right. If they really care about you, then they'll be happy for you choosing that because. But if they don't care about you, they're going to be mad that you're not doing what they're doing. And
Mhm.
and so it's just this. Back to the original question. It's just giving you enough time to understand all this, to step back and say, what is going on with my life? Like, who are my friends? What
Mhm.
do I care about? What's important to me? having true connection with people and understanding. I started drinking at 13 years old, and having because it played such an incredible part of my life, I don't think I really understood what true connection means, because I always supplemented it with alcohol. And
Oh, so you
yeah,
didn't really feel the real like, you didn't feel it without the alcohol. So you're saying, like,
well,
your
and
connections to people were influenced by that at age 13 forward?
yeah, I mean, it was always a prevalent part of my social situations. And so what I've learned is that, like, true connection and laughter and joy with another person just fills you up. You didn't need the alcohol to do that.
Mhm.
You have it within you. Now it is learned and practiced. I didn't have that awareness. Um, but once you start feeling better and you have that clarity, and oh my gosh, the calmness that comes with it too, that was a super big revelation to me, because I used to get angry a lot and I used to react, and people could push my buttons easily. And I mean, that, like, when there's people drinking, anger fights happen more often. You're just more reactionary.
Yeah.
And
So
I had
Saturday
got
night is a difficult night for the police because the combination of, people all that drinking tends to cause
fights.
conflicts.
Yeah. And I used to think, because of course I didn't have alcohol, not in my life very much, but I used to think that I was just an angry person and I hated myself.
Wow.
And then when I took alcohol away, I realized I was calmer and I could see things for what they were, and I didn't react as much and, cry and feel offended. I mean, of course it still happens, but it's not this magnified
Yeah, it just
reaction.
seems like it's not as amplified. It just seems like if you take it when you're my father had been an alcoholic, and I could see the change from his, like, business self when he was, like, not drinking to his kinda and he would get angry. He had this, like, anger would, like, elevate. It was like a pressure. There was, like, this
Mhm.
kinda thing, and then, like and everybody, all of my brothers, like, we just, like, try to stay away from him
Mhm.
because, like and the thing that we had an example of a father who was an alcoholic, but I guess we didn't feel like I was so kind of upset about it that I never got into alcohol because I'm like, "I don't wanna be like that." So
Well, you're
the way I saw
lucky.
it was I didn't go and say, "Well, I'm gonna be like him," or, "I'm gonna go do that." I was like, "Well, I don't wanna be like that at all." So,
You're
I
very
kinda went
you're
the
very
opposite.
Yeah. You're very fortunate, because in my coaching, I have recognized that for those kids who do have a problem or had a parent with a problem, when they start engaging, there is some kind, I would say it's a gene expression that gets transferred down. And you're fine without it as you are because you've chosen it. But for those kids who choose it, it opens up the door. The gene expression opens, like you turn on a switch, and that
Mhm.
child is more at risk because of the parent. And
Yeah.
so, I
I have a
love
lot of
talk
friends that had the same kinda
I love
I
talking
had friends
about
that had the
these
same kind of
things.
scenario.
Yeah. I love
Yeah,
talking
they
about
had the
this.
same
Oh,
scenario. Sorry.
yeah, no, I think we have a delayed reaction. I'm sorry too. Um, I love talking about this to bring awareness to people that might be listening and they have that problem with the parent, and they need to understand that they're susceptible, to that. And it's no fun once you're down that path. It's, there's a lot of years of turmoil. I guess I didn't get to describe to you, what happens is over time, it's fun, it's fun, it's fun, and then it gets to be a problem, right? And all of a sudden you're overweight and you can't lose weight because alcohol, your liver's processing alcohol and not fat, or you're hungover and you're not as productive, or you're getting in those arguments and your relationships are falling apart. You're spending, oh my gosh, the money, the money you spend on alcohol, right? It's just all of the costs. And then one day you go, you know what? I gotta stop this. And you try and you can't do it. And you go, what's wrong? It's really like that. It's like you don't know you have a problem, and then one day it's like, oh. And so then you start the negotiating in your head. And this is true for everyone with an alcohol problem. So I know there's a lot of denial going on because I talk to a lot of people, but I think the denial comes with the fear of the label. But you realize there's a problem, and so you start putting boundaries around yourself, like only after 5, only with other people, only on the weekends, only at holidays, only when I go, I'm on a date. It's just all these boundaries. And then what happens is you start breaking your promises with yourself. And you want to talk about a mental health issue. Like I was a performer. I had a goal. You get that goal, you get it done. You get her done. Anytime my mind would tell, and all of a sudden I am faced with, I need to deal with this, and I can't, over and over. Years. I mean, years. And so now your mental health is suffering. And it just becomes what I call secret suffering. And that's why I'm sharing about the denial. People know they have a problem. You're not shocking them when you tell them. They just want to hide it,
Yeah, there's a lot of things when I've talked to a lot of people who do life coaching on different issues, it's always been kind of like the shame of it, the guilt of it. People keeping a secret from themselves, and it's like a point of like a lot of times it's like when you start to forgive yourself, when you start to actually look in the looking glass and actually question, your behavior, and actually, try to get to the root cause of like why, can't I stop? And
Mm-hmm.
actually acknowledge that you can't stop. And because a lot of times they'll say, well, I can stop, but then you keep on not being able to do it. And so then it's obvious that you can't. Then you have to actually accept the fact that you have a problem. And no matter what you're into, once you start to, forgive yourself or start to try to understand where you are, I think
Mm-hmm.
that's where you can start to make forward progress with anything.
Yeah, and that's the other differentiator that I try to incorporate to lessen the shame of it is simply to reflect on, it's not a character flaw, right? It's a neurological habit. Let's just, instead of looking at the person, I want to develop awareness about the substance and what it's doing to you. When I drink it, one is never enough, right? When I drink it, this happens. When I drink it, and identify the lie that it's telling you, oh, it's going to calm me down. Well, no, it created more anxiety. So it's looking at the substance, because I used to be a super heavy smoker too, like 2 and 3 packs a day. I'm a pedal to the metal type of person. And you just need to develop. I quit because it was killing me, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to do, is take the focus away as a shortcoming of the person, have them understand the science of the brain and their habit loop, the lie, and
Mhm.
focus on the substance, because the alcohol companies, you better believe they're lying to us.
It's
like,
like the cigarette companies. The cigarette
yeah.
companies for years, they were able to kind of con everybody, into thinking there was no health issue at all. And it's same thing, I think, with alcohol. Any company that pushes something when they know from their own research is damaging, and then they try to hide that,
Yeah.
then like there's something up. Yeah. So I mean, and so a lot of people can get conned by advertising. It's everywhere. I mean, almost every industry was being funded from cigarettes and alcohol. Even today, alcohol funds a lot of things.
Yeah.
Um, in my business, like in music, it funds a lot of events. And I think in Europe, they were getting so many problems with the alcohol at events that they started to think that maybe they should ban it in certain places in the
They
EU.
just banned it at the World Cup. What was the World Cup? Because I pay a lot of attention to the stuff going on around alcohol, and we are seeing a shift. The
Mhm.
younger kids like you are seeing their parents and what's going on with them and the problems that alcohol. This is what I love. Children are so aware, like, and good for them. So our younger generation is coming along and going, So that's a thing. More and more, there's awareness. I follow the information out of the National Institute for Health, and few people are aware of how many cancers are the likelihood of cancer in a particular area, including breast cancer, increase when you drink alcohol. Alcohol causes inflammation in your body. Cancer loves inflammation, right?
High blood pressure too. I read some articles that it can increase your blood pressure, but people thought it did the opposite. People were kind of maybe conned by the industry that, oh, it calms you down. But then it actually is a lot of medical history now showing that it actually increases your blood pressure.
Oh, that was one of my big frightful points. I was watching my blood pressure, and the diastolic, the lower number, was super high, and I started doing research, and it's like, well, your kidneys are struggling. I'm like, what? And I was just on the verge of medication. Like the doctors were asking me to monitor it, and that's a real silent killer. But when I put alcohol to the side and I just started walking, no major exercise, I remember I took my blood, I went from 150 over 95 to 117 over 68 just by
Mhm.
removing alcohol. So,
Yeah, and a lot of people don't even realize that. They thought cigarettes was the thing that does it, but alcohol, I think the industry tries to hide it. They don't want people to realize, um, because it tends to get put into situations where it's supposed to relax you. That's kind of like their narrative. It's going to relax you and make you, so if something's increasing your hypertension, that's not really relaxing you.
I actually was just reading something just this week or last week that the first one or two drinks do um, suppress your nervous system, so
Bring it
relax.
down.
But after that, it's all toxicity, right? It's all toxicity anyway.
Well,
But
so
that's
yeah.
why people get the high originally, initially because they're stressed, and that first drink goes okay. But then as soon as you go beyond that, there's no health benefits. But the other secret, like, thing that can happen in your body, especially, as a guy, we don't, I don't think guys are as good about going to the doctors and stuff. Your
Mhm.
liver can
Yeah.
just collapse and stop working without you ever knowing it. And the statistics for liver disease in younger people is horrendous. I mean, absolutely horrendous. These young people drinking so much alcohol and
Yeah, it's the
finding
binge
out,
drinking. It's like the frats that I really have been railing against at my college, and we actually got rid of all the frats just because there were so many incidents at my college that all the alums, we just kind of said, no, the frats got to go. And because the kids were hurting themselves and people were jumping off
oh,
the roofs of the frat. doing all kinds of crazy things, getting all kinds of incidents with like the girls and the boys were having incidents because they were doing all kinds of crazy things they shouldn't have been doing. And it really was out of control. And it was like, that's not what a learning institution is supposed to be about, is you guys getting out of control. It's like, so we got to, if you guys can't control it, then we'll take it away. So we kind of took it away.
I was at church probably a month ago, and I was in our cafe, and there, I was sitting down, and the person I was with said to this guy I didn't know, "Hey, she wrote a book," and he's like, "Oh, what about?" And how to put alcohol to the side for 12 weeks. And he's like, "Well, why 12 weeks? Why this? Why that?" Like asking a lot of questions. Well, first of all, he ended up going and buying the book, which was in the store, but he was an ER doctor.
Oh, wow.
And I have a hard time believing this statistic, but I'm just relaying what he told me. He said 70% of what he sees in the ER is alcohol related. And I'm like,
That's not
what?
surprising. It's not surprising.
Right. I mean, arguments, fights, suicide, overdoses, accidents. I was just thinking about the fraternity thing, and I know a nurse, and I shared that statistic with her, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I just saw a 20-year-old come in, and he was drinking, and he decided to do a backflip in a baby pool, and he broke his back and was paralyzed for life."
Yeah,
You
that's the
know,
kind of stuff we were kind of railing about at the college. This kid like jumped off the roof of a frat just because it was like a prank. And he was supposed to hit something, something, he missed it, like mattresses or something. But it's just like an inane thing that you wouldn't do if you're really thinking right. But they weren't thinking right because they've been drinking all night. you know.
right. Well, that's the other thing that comes about with the shame. We're talking about the mental health effect. When you review the next day something you may have said or done that you would never do, and you have to reflect on that and be horrified, about what you did or said, and just the beer goggles too. It's just in terms of male and female hooking up, and just you think about it, would that really have happened if alcohol wasn't involved? And my personal
Yeah,
answer, having been involved in that early on in my life, no, I wouldn't have done that without alcohol. Yeah.
yeah, because I would think like when you're a teenager and you get into that scene. I was a child of the '70s, and the kids were all at these parties, and I always felt like the odd person out because I had already made the decision because of my father I wasn't going to get into alcohol, and then I wasn't into marijuana or any of those other things. And so I was kind of like, everybody said, well, he's weird because he's not like in tune with everybody else. But I was like, I was with the wallflowers that we're not into that. So we were talking and be kind of like not being in that fog. And it was like, we weren't really connecting with the people in the fog because we couldn't, because they couldn't connect with us.
Right. Yeah. And that's when you realize those, people care about your connection with them based on what they're doing. Did you find a group of people that didn't drink that you
Yeah,
were?
I found the people who are like sci-fi kids and there's like Star Trek and comic book collectors, and we'd go to a place and we'd be hanging out, drinking Coke, drinking Sprite, or just hanging out talking about Leonard Nimoy or talking about Star Wars, or and we were into our own thing, and we were just kind of nerdy, and everybody's like, well, those are like nerd kids, but like we weren't the popular kids. We were, I was with a bunch of musicians who were kind of straight edge, which means we didn't get into things.
Right.
But we were into doing the music, and we were very productive. Even to this day, I'm still a musician because I looked at it because I wanted to get into the music. Some musicians get into it for the party. They actually get
Right.
into it for the party. I actually got into it because I like playing music.
Right. No, I agree with you, and I think that is important that you eventually find your tribe, and there may be some adjustments. I didn't. I had a friend at the time I quit, and he owned a brewery, and so that was super, you know, interesting. A friend of mine had invited me. I think it was just 3 months into not drinking, maybe four, and they said, "Hey, you want to go to a winery?" And I said yes because I wanted to prove to them that I could be fun without drinking. And
Hmm.
for me, I think that was wise. They did, accept me. They didn't think it was, they did like, why aren't you drinking, Roseanne? And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, because I'm so much better. I've lost weight. And at that time I had kind of decided I wasn't going to. I was actually coaching um, with the company that I went through right after. But um, I was, just saying, just it didn't. I'm I weigh less. I feel better. It's better for me, and
Hmm.
I feel better in the morning. And the guy that owned the brewery is like, yeah, I love that feeling in the morning. I mean, that's not true, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's their just way of joshing. But I had parties subsequent um, with him there, and he accepted me, and that's when like it's a real relationship. It's not,
Yeah.
would he invite me on the ski trip with with his other friends that are drinking? Probably not, but that's okay. You just figure it out. Um, and I definitely know people who have been devastated thinking, oh, I thought they were my best friend and now they don't want to hang out with me. Well, that
Yeah.
is kind of a bummer. But again, you find your tribe, you know?
Yeah. It was interesting because it's a weird situation, but I'm a cancer survivor. I was 27. I got a sarcoma. I didn't drink. I didn't smoke anything. And
Wow.
the weird thing about that was I experienced people who didn't want to be around me who were like 27, 28 because I had had cancer. That kind of made them fearful of their own mortality. And I found friends that did not want to be around me because they didn't want to have to think about that. And later, a couple years later, I found out some of them, that's exactly why they didn't want to hang around because they were kind of scared that they can catch cancer. But the idea I had it was kind of hard for them to face. And some people
Yeah.
could either be with me or not be with me. And I said, well, that's weird that that would happen. But
It's really hard for somebody going through cancer, but I understand what you're saying 100% because I used to be that person. I wasn't a person of faith, and I am a person of strong faith now. But at the time, um, I remember I had a neighbor who was dying of cancer. And when it's having cancer versus dying of cancer. This guy was definitely dying of cancer, and I loved him. And I had an opportunity to go over and say hi to him, see how I couldn't. And I couldn't do it. And you know why? It was so uncomfortable because I thought, how are you? Is a stupid question. They're dying, right?
mhm.
and
Yeah, it's
but
hard. People don't know how to act. That's what I
yeah, but
found.
God took care of that for me. He was so funny because I was when I was a believer, I was in church, and I was a Bible study leader, and I was told that this woman in the night group had cancer. She was super young, and she uh, she was at the door. When you go into church, you know how you have somebody handing out
Oh,
some.
yeah,
I
yeah.
used to I used to go to the other door,
Oh,
so I
wow.
didn't have to say hello. How are you? Because I thought how are you was a stupid question for somebody struggling with cancer. And so I get that, but then God has a really funny sense of humor. I ended up befriending her at a conference. I took her to chemo, and I was with her throughout her whole thing until the day she died, and started a ministry for the sick and dying. So, you know, I
Mhm.
obviously got over that, but I understand the fear that can be embedded
I would just
in.
wonder somehow, at some level, like what happens with some people when you change. like your behavior, it's kind of like that kind of situation where it's uncomfortable for certain people to be around you when you change like your the way you've been operating. Right? So once you've decided for your life you're going to do this, like, and I made decisions once that I got out of the cancer that I was going to be more honest with myself about what I really wanted, and I was going to kind of be who I needed to be. And I really kind of like pre-cancer, post-cancer, I was like almost two different people because I was putting like ceilings on myself. I was like scared of things, and I ended up traveling internationally. I lived in Japan. I did
Isn't
stuff I
that
never did
wonderful?
before. Yeah, I
Yeah.
just started doing all kinds of different things that I was fearful. And after surviving cancer at 27, my fear level about like life kind of like, well, if I can survive that, I can do like all kinds of things. So I didn't feel like I was being restricted anymore by myself.
Yeah. And that's kind of how the alcohol-free journey is too. It's once you conquer that, it's like, what's next? And then a lot of reasons people drink is or when you're drinking and you have this negative self-talk that's happening all the time, somebody looks at you and you think it's about you, or somebody's mad at you and it's just kind of weird. But when you get out of it and you can kind of think through and go, well, that's their, like, we're all dealing with stuff. And being fearless about who you are and comfortable in your own skin. And I think that happens when we go through some kind of event like that, or we make it through to the other side of alcohol. Getting rid of that narrative is so, that internal narrative, fear-based narrative, so important to living your
Yeah,
life
I
to
think
the
yeah,
fullest. Yeah.
fear
Fear
is
of
like a
judgment.
big impediment. Yeah,
Fear of
definitely.
judgment, fear of failure, fear of death, fear of belonging, fear of rejection. I mean, I've been taught there's only two emotions, love and fear. And all emotions are rooted in one of those two things, right?
Hmm.
And
Different degrees.
yeah, and I believe that wholeheartedly. So, how do we
Because
get
I'm
off on
here today because like, but I think that today, I mean, here I'm doing this podcast, and the 26-year-old me would have never done it. There
Mhm.
I was painfully shy, couldn't do public speaking. I was a keyboardist, never sang. And since 2016, I've been, singing and working on things. I totally radically shifted who I was because I realized what was possible. And a lot of times people don't try something because they don't think they're going to be good enough. And the musicians won't try something because, well, I can't match Jeff Beck, or I can't match Jimmy Page, or I can't match Jimi Hendrix or Janis Joplin. So I'm not even going to try it. And I was like, well, you should be you. And I'm a producer,
Right.
and I'm always talking to young people and say, don't try to be, Jeff Beck. Just be the best version of yourself. You're inspired by whoever, but like you should be, excited about what you can do. And I always hear in somebody's demo something really great, and I don't want to change who they are and make them match somebody else. I want to bring out the best version of themselves.
Well, that's
And
what we're looking for, individuality and something different. I'm sure in the music industry, you're looking for that different sound. So, yeah, people get really messed up when they start comparing. We all have our own gifts and we all have our own journey. And I wish I have to memorize a quote, but there's a great quote about living in fear. It chokes you. And I feel like the same way as you is, I used to do all these things I couldn't imagine. Like, I was finance and administration geek. And now, speaking and coaching and alcoholic versus business, it's all different to me. And I am being pushed to new things as well. I mean, marketing, but I just go, okay, you can do it. This is your new thing. This is your new gig. And it is fun to wake up and say, what's next? right?
Yeah, I think that's what like when people put walls on themselves, and sometimes, having something that's restricting you because it's a habit and it actually puts a ceiling or puts a gate on you and keeps you like in a certain position, that when you start to realize that you can get out of that you can jump over that gate, and then you can start to handle your fear of failing and say, hey, it's okay, that I can try something, and maybe I'm not going to do it 100% the first time. Maybe
Yeah, and
it's okay.
I want
you
to
know
address something that I definitely touch upon in the coaching program too. When you want to change something about yourself, initially it's uncomfortable. And so we always want to move, you know, towards the known and the comfortable and move away from the uncomfortable. But what I tell people is to embrace the discomfort, because that's when you know that change is happening. And it's applicable to everything you do in your life. You want to run a marathon, you think the first half mile is fun? Like, it's it's super uncomfortable. In every situation, when you do something new, there's discomfort, there's a learning curve. And that's why, um, in the journey of alcohol freedom, I really want people to look at not only what's wrong, but if you flip everything on its head, what if you had more money? What if you felt better about yourself? What if you were more productive? What if you were healthier? What's possible? And then you can develop this vision of yourself to run towards, and to keep in
Mhm.
mind. Um, I like to also tell people who may not be with, have a partner. For me, it was after I got divorced. I was thinking about, and that's when my drinking got the worst. And I was thinking about, you always think about what's next. You want to meet somebody else. And I'm like, well, I don't want to meet somebody like me.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to meet a partier. And then I was thinking about, if they're not a partier, they're not going to want anything to do with me. So that's a conundrum, right? So
Mhm.
who do you want to become, and who do you want to attract? And that's a motivation as well. Yeah.
So,
So
if you don't have a partner, and you're trying to like move forward, I see this concept of accountability groups, and you say it's an important part of the process. Maybe you can talk about what an accountability group is and how that helps with the process.
yeah, I think in anything that we do in life, it's a rare person that can say, you know what, I'm just gonna do this. Like, boom, done. Like, it happens. There are people that are just so strong-willed they can do that. But most of us need to get out of our own heads and stop the conversations in our heads that are driving us literally crazy. Because the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and
You know,
expecting a different result.
result.
And when it has to do with drinking or another habit, that is all you're doing. The same conversation, the same lack of accountability with yourself, and the same broken promises. And so when you have accountability, you can go in to, a group. We have group coaching online, which is very beneficial. um, but you recognize, well, wait, I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one that thought that was hard. I'm not the only one that was scared. I'm not everything everybody shares. It's like, not alone, because you're having these conversations in your head alone. And so the accountability groups are just great to know that you're not in this alone. You're also making a commitment to other people. And most of us are much better at keeping promises to somebody else than to ourselves,
Mm,
you know?
that's true.
So I think the science is that you're 5 times more likely to succeed in a group, and that's certainly true for me,
That makes a lot of sense because they say, human beings are very social animals and they tend to like do best in groups. I was a sociology major, which is like
Oh,
study of human beings in like microcosms and macrocosm groups. And
mm-hmm,
basically it's kind of like psychology, but it's based all on group behavior. And from like, individual group, people to the microcosm level to a macrocosm level, understanding how people interact,
mm-hmm,
how like riots or somebody was to shout fire in a crowded room and watching behavior patterns and all kinds of studies and groups to see what would happen. And guys like Weber and these ideas that would come up with icons of like anomie, when you're isolated from society, then you tend
mm-hmm.
to not have connections. You tend to dive into like kind of negative darknesses and things like that. But if you're more tied, you would tend to have a more positive outcome if you're more tied to a certain sector or connection to people. But
Yeah. And so what was happening to me, and I definitely see a pattern with clients as well. The more you drink, the more your world starts shrinking because I used to go out socially, but you don't want people to know how much you drink. So I'd have a couple, I'd worry about drinking and driving. I'd get home and then I'd drink major
oh, great.
amounts of alcohol by myself. And sometimes you don't even want to go out because you just want to have all the alcohol you want without worrying about somebody knowing how much alcohol. And so and then you just get comfortable being by yourself. Like, why bother? But your world just continues to shrink when you drink.
And
And then
actually kind of dangerous.
yeah, it
When
is
you get to that
because
zone, that can be very dangerous. You'll be by yourself and can nobody even know that you're in a bad position, like medically or
well,
something.
and
But
and for most people, I do want to share this. For most people with a substance abuse problem, they will definitely consider, like, I'd rather not be here on earth. I definitely was thinking I wasn't going to do anything about it because I was faith based, but I was cool if God took me. Like, Car, I think a person two shows ago said something like, if a car broadsides me, I'm okay. That's exactly the thinking that I
mhm,
had.
yeah.
Like, I'm not going to do anything about it, God, but if you let it happen, I'm going to be really happy about this. And
Mhm.
people get to that point. I mean, I was an enrollment coach first, and I would have conversations with people, men and women, and they share with me like, "Have you ever thought about not wanting to live anymore?" And I'm like, "Sure, absolutely." And that's relieving too, to know that we're all there. And I just want to let people know you don't have to be. I thought that my life was worthless, useless, didn't have any purpose. And, here I am. I wrote a book. I'm coaching people. It's possible. It's possible. I just can't even believe the lies that my mind told me. So,
Now, do you find when you coach people that helps kind of when you're helping other people that it helps you? What I find is
oh
like
my
people who are
goodness.
teachers or life coaches and mentors that they feel that work with other people is a continuation of their own therapy.
I would call it a purpose-driven life. There's, nothing better than using your gifts and knowledge to help somebody else transform, right? And most charitable endeavors were created from tragedy, right? And they want their tragedy to be meaningful. And so it's not only in the coaching world, it's in every world where you can use your gift. You could use your gift of music, somewhere to make a child or an elderly person, just come alive, even if it was for that 10 minutes or an hour. You leave filled up,
Hmm.
and I think that in my coaching, I tell people And I encourage people to find their gift. This is another important aspect to the alcohol-free coaching. You can't feel like you just took something out of your life and now there's a big void, right?
Yeah, it's a funny.
You took something out that was you thought was meaningful, but it was actually toxic. So now you have the time that you used to drink, the time you used to recover from drinking, and the time that you used to think about how to stop drinking. All of that time comes back to you.
Yeah, and you can be creative. You could get into
Now
sports.
yeah.
You could get into like, acting, you could get into writing, you get into music, you get into painting. You can take that time you were kind of not moving forward, you're on the, just kind of spinning. And actually, as a musician, that's what we try to do is like we take those things that were kind of not working for us and turn it into art. Where you take
Yeah.
those observations that, oh, okay, I had a hard time. Because some of the greatest music comes from the fact that musicians are able to be in tune with universal kind of themes that everybody can understand, like
Mhm.
longing and romance and loss and all these things. If you put that into a song, just the piano piece can be very affecting. And it can
Right.
actually, because it comes from your heart. Like when you're musicians, like it's not just the words, it's how you play the piano or the guitar or the bass that convey melancholy or convey happiness. And it's that moment that you're able to document as a creative person that instead of going and drinking or smoking, or you turn that into a moment that you share with other people.
Yeah,
And
and
that's
it's
what
a
we try to do.
yeah, it's a gift, and some people have creative gifts, but it could be bowling or golfing or math, or it doesn't matter, carpentry, but you can still use all of those gifts somewhere to help somebody else, and
Yeah.
it gives that same feeling of purpose and usefulness. And we all want to know that we're making the world a better place. And it is super hard to do that when you are drinking a lot. Super hard.
Yeah. Because you're not participating. Like all you just mentioned, you're participating in with groups and you're being present, right? So you're being able to be present and be a participating individual with other individuals sharing whatever you can share, whatever, because every
Right.
human being has a talent. And just maybe
Hmm.
just your conversation, going and saying hi to somebody that doesn't expect you to say hi to them,
Yeah, I love that.
having the conversation with somebody, and you just, giving a nugget that they didn't expect, and
Yeah.
that can be very relevant. That can actually cause them to change their whole life. And you didn't even think about it. But the fact that you being present and not being, self-involved can actually be very positive.
Yeah. Random acts of kindness, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
The
our
idea
smile
that
and our disposition and, you know, s- you and me, we wake up in the morning and we just say, what a great day. How can I enjoy the world? How can I give back, right? How can I share something meaningful? That's what you're doing. You're sharing something meaningful. And it's a wonderful way to live. And it's really hard to live that way when we are trapped in a substance. And yeah, and just hope that people know that they don't have to be trapped, that there's many people before them that got untrapped, that there's a way out.
Yeah, so I do want to share with our audio audience. There is a link below the www.theplansshehasforme.com, or the plans he has for me.com. And
Yeah.
so that you can click that, and when you click that, what does the person see on your website?
Well, you'll be able to press the red button and get the free Kickstart method for alcohol freedom, which is, all my best tips for how to be successful if you want to take on that 12-week challenge. You can find out more about the coaching program on that website. You can buy the daily devotional, just lots of resources. You can find out all about me, my story. Yeah.
So that will be clickable on the fully published version of the podcast, and even on the audio podcast that have the description when you go to kick it off. That link will be clickable, so you'll be able to go right to it. And we will be published on major podcast platforms later today, like Spotify and Anchor and iHeartRadio. So thank you again for being on the program. I think it's always interesting to talk to new people. That's why I podcast, because it's a way during COVID for me to connect with people all over the world, and I find it very exciting and enlightening to be able to get everybody's vision on how they are able to move forward in life. And I've talked to lots of people since 2016, and this was a great conversation. And I think it can be a immense assistance to anybody who's undergoing this kind of problem right now.
Oh,
So I
I
hope
surely
people
hope so. I surely hope so. Thanks for having me, Phantom. It's been an honor. It's just a great conversation, as you said. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great night.